what we want to do is make mini tests. Like we want to prototype our ideas. That way we can get analytics and we can get data back from our audience to see like, are we making improvement? Is this getting worse or is this getting better? And we do this in a continuous loop.
Hello, fabulous person. Beate Chelette here, the Growth Architect. Welcome back to the Business Growth Architect Show, where we bring you cutting-edge business strategies from some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs, business transformation experts, and visionaries who want to help you to scale your impact. Look for one tangible strategy that you can take back and implement right away. And now back to our guest. Hello and welcome back to the Business Growth Architect Show. This is your host, Beate Chelette, and you are in for a treat, not just a little treat, a big treat, a double treat, like ice cream and whipped cream and the cherry and the chocolate syrup and the sprinkles and everything on it, because today we are talking to really one of my favorite people, Chris Do. Chris, tell the audience who you are, what you do, and what do they need to know about you?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris. I'm a loud introvert. And in my former life, I was a graphic designer and I made commercials and music videos for a living. I made them for really big brands and world famous advertising agencies. And in 2014, I started making videos on YouTube. The decision to do so changed the course of my life. Now this really big mission, which is to teach a billion people how to make a living doing what they love.
I love that. So we have a history because Chris and I met multiple years ago at a conference when you were doing a commercial or some filming for a large company. And I've been on your podcast, which I loved, with the worst audio ever, which I still sweat bullets over. But there really is something about you, which is why I wanted you to be part of this podcast and this show to share with the audience, because your vision of inspiring a billion people is audacious, hairy, and amazing. And so, because we talk a lot about strategy on this show, my question to you is, what does strategy mean for you?
It's a really good question. I'm going to go with what I believe the dictionary definition of strategy is, because I agree with it. And very abstractly, it's a plan from how to go from point A to point B. That's a strategy. It's the term I think that's used a lot in the military, but now we're seeing it used in marketing and advertising and business. We know where we are. We know where we'd like to go, and we need a plan. Otherwise, it's a hope and a prayer.
I think this is the definition I go by as well. So it's not wishful thinking. It has to have a goal, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you work with a lot of creatives, and you inspire. I think we're now in the millions of people already, right? So you must have tons of different strategies, but what's the one that you like the most?
Oh, good question. So here's the thing is, I'm kind of late to this whole marketing, content creation, and brand strategy game, relatively speaking. A friend of mine, Jose Caballero, he's the one who introduced me to user experience design, and it really revolutionized the way I think about things. We build websites, and this is his expertise. We build websites for people, so we need to know who these people are. We need to know what their goals are and what challenges they have. And good user experience design is really giving people what they want in the fewest number of steps. It sounds really obvious, but you just look at a few websites and you realize they're not employing good UX principles. So when I started to look at the world through the eyes of our customers and what they want, and what their hopes and dreams are, what's at stake if they fail, then it gives us a very clear roadmap as to how we can serve them better. And I love to quote Zig Ziglar on this. He's like, you can get everything you want in life if you help enough people get what they want in life. And that's really that's our strategy. The more we help people, the more successful we become.
So let's dive into that a little bit and take this apart. So there is, in growth architecture, we look at this, we map this out. So there's a column for a problem, and then there's a column for solution, and then there's a column in the middle, and that's the secret sauce, right? Mm-hmm. That they don't need to talk about on how they deliver it. So How does someone that goes, yeah, yeah, I know what they want, and then they immediately want to vomit the solution that they have learned, right? So it's not about them, but it's about the solution they created. How do you help someone like that? How do you take them through the steps of do this, don't do that, go there?
Okay. I would first challenge that we actually don't even know what the problem is. So if we assume we know what the problem is, we're going to come up with answers, and the answers tend to be almost always wrong. I forget who said this, but there's no such thing as a right answer to the wrong question. So what we should be doing is remaining open, curious, and learning to look at the world through the customer's eyes, because we default to what we know how to do and the solutions we are to provide. But oftentimes that's not really what the person wants or needs. And so we spend time learning about them, being empathetic. Kind of this exercise we do, it's called mind walking. We walk in the mind of the person that we're trying to attract to us. And oftentimes we learn about the things, the jobs that they have to do every single day. And we're not talking about just your work related jobs, but your personal and your interpersonal jobs that you have. And so that could be managing the household or taking care of kids or teaching someone something. There's a lot of jobs we have to do each and every single day. They're sometimes interconnected, because when you're having a bad day at home, there's a good chance you're going to have a not so great day at work. And so we can't just solve one problem and ignore the other. So we're trying to look at the whole person. And whenever we can identify gaps, we make note of those things. Once we understand what the gaps are, the gaps between where they are and where they want to be, we then put on our thinking hat and say, okay, of all the things that they could use to solve this problem, what is the most effective solution? It's only after that then we ask ourselves, do we provide any of these solutions? And is this an opportunity for us to invent something new for the customer?
I like that. So to rephrase this and making sure that I understand this correct is the idea is not just to look at the bullet point list, the classic bullet point internet marketing list
Yeah.
of if you have a problem with X, or if you have a problem with X, or if you have a problem with X, then buy this because it's going to solve A, B, and C. So you say, number one, let's not assume. So how do we not assume? Do you ask? Do you survey? Do you send another one of those dreaded surveys? How do you find out?
It's a very good question. Hopefully, we get people who in our organization who've got firsthand experience, like they're on the front line of working with customers, because oftentimes there's a misalignment between what executives think the customers think and what the people on the floor actually know. And there's a big gap there. So hopefully you can bring in a facilitator who's neutral, who can conduct these kinds of conversations with your organization, so you can use the intelligence of the entire organization to come up with a composite of who they think the customers are, who they like to have more of, and what they think their challenges are. You can then later on couple this with research, and you can pay people to kind of answer questions or to study them or to interview them just to find out. You can also do a lot of intelligent social listening, and you can say, okay, let's see if our brand holds up to be true to what we say. And we can just lean in on social media, on Twitter, wherever people go to complain about things. And it could be, I think it's called Glassdoor, where people can complain about corporations from the inside anonymously. We can look on Yelp. There's a lot of places where we can look at data and try to get the sentiment of how people actually feel about our company. From there, I think we have a healthier perspective. And yes, you can spend a lot of time and money doing this very exhaustive research, but at some point, you got to try some ideas out and you can test. And so instead of saying we're going to come up with one solution, set it and forget it, as Ron Popeil would say, what we want to do is make mini tests. Like we want to prototype our ideas. That way we can get analytics and we can get data back from our audience to see, like, are we making improvement? Is this getting worse or is this getting better? And we do this in a continuous loop.
Interesting. And then that at that point comes the data in at some point, right? So
Right.
so tell me about that. So now we've done all kinds of creative and paid things to get to the data. A lot of times the data, from what I've seen, Chris, is that the data is, because the way you ask the question
Right.
already has a tint on it,
It
right?
does.
So if you say, well, we want to look at the whole person, which in growth architecture we do as well, because I agree with you that a 32-year-old mother of two that is newly divorced, that has to leave and pick up two kids, small children, is going to have a completely different mindset to problem solving, risk taking, and decision making than somebody who's a 25-year-old fresh out of some fancy college
Right.
who has a different idea about that. So how do we get to the nuances of that person? Is that back to the subject matter experts that you have, or the people on the front line that you talk about that have this information, or maybe even are these people?
Yeah, ideally, you have a combination of both. You want to have someone in your organization who's reflective of the customers that you hope to serve, because they're going to give you a firsthand account of what their life is like. And they can also validate some of the things that you're coming up with. But I'll give you an example. Many years ago, I had a client and they do self-storage facilities, and they do it really well. They're super smart USC business school guys running self-storage facilities. And to my surprise and just complete shock, they told me 99% or some high 90% of their customers are single moms. I never even thought this, because I thought there were a bunch of dudes bringing in their tractors, their trophies, and all kinds of stuff that they need to hide from their wives, right? It's all this garbage. But it's actually mostly single moms of lower to middle income. And they told me why this is and what's happening, right? They're in transition, they're downsizing, they're upsizing, and they're oftentimes bringing their kids to the facilities because they don't have the kind of money to have a babysitter or a nanny to look after them. And so that was just a giant light bulb moment for me. Now, we could have operated under false data, because I was really relying on the clients to know who their customers are. So we have a hypothesis. So if they're mostly single moms with kids, lower to middle income, using these facilities, then that will inform almost all of our creative decisions. The lighting needs to change. The color palette needs to change. The services that we offer to make people feel safe and secure and that's attractive for kids while mom's taking care of stuff. This is really important. So here's the thing. These guys, these operators, they're incredible. They put cameras everywhere, and they weren't sure how people would perceive having cameras, like his big brother always watching you. But with this understanding that it's going to be women and their children, I need to know when I'm walking down that corner that some creepo is not going to harass or attack me. And so what we wound up doing is creating a bunch of graphics saying, smile, you're on camera. And we would say all kinds of things like lights, camera, and action or whatever, just to make light of it that there are cameras everywhere and not have this big brother oppressive feel, but more like, hey, everybody be on your best behavior. There are kids and moms running around here.
I love that. And then it has the opposite effect. Then with a reframe like that, suddenly, moms go, even if my little one runs off while I'm turning my back, there's a camera there. So I feel safer and more secure. I love that a lot. Yeah, I think that the assumption a lot of times, and going back to your strategy, the assumption that what another person is experiencing is generally false. Right. One of my favorite quotes is, all generalizations are false, including this one. Right. From Mark Twain, is that you want to ask the questions. And then sometimes what happens, and I want to ask you about this, and then sometimes you say, yeah, but this is what we're hearing. And then they say, that can't possibly be true. What do you do when people are arguing with the validity of the information, which in corporate America happens all the time?
Yeah. So this is where I may differ with some of your listeners on this one, is that where am I getting my conclusions from? So oftentimes, because my audiences are mostly creative people, they often come in with a lot of bias and have already concluded what needs to be done. And I find that to be dangerous and just a bad professional practice altogether. So generally speaking, when I'm talking to clients, I want to understand from them what they see and point out to them when they don't even agree with themselves. The same person even. I'm not talking about even within team members, but when you said you want to make a campaign feel like a big epic summer event, and then you say, but I want to use a really intimate voice, like, well, which is it? Because it's hard to be big and epic and also to be intimate and personal. And so we ask them, like, there's a sliding scale here. Where are you really? And so what we find out a lot of times is people aren't as careful with the words that they choose, and they'll use a buzzword or something that they were just thinking about like over lunch. They'll use those words kind of haphazardly. It's your job as the strategist or the facilitator to listen to those words and reconcile differences so that you can get clarity. So at no time am I thinking I'm trying to sell you my idea. I just want a better understanding of what your idea and your observations are. Now, this will happen a lot. You have a very young person, and I insist whenever we do these meetings, these strategy meetings, to have somebody who's not been with the organization for more than a year. It's someone who's relatively young, because they tend to tell you the truth and they see it for what it really is. They're not yet
Right.
bought into the entire
They
program.
haven't
Right?
they haven't been forced in the structure yet.
Mm-mm.
They're still
And
rebelling against it.
they're still, and they're not smart enough to keep their mouth closed too, because they're up for a promotion or something.
Yeah,
So they're likely to say what it is that they think. And if you give them a platform to speak, they will speak their mind. And then we have rules. When this person's speaking, let's just listen.
yes.
And you're going to hear conflict between what the executives think and what the young person thinks. And if you do this right, if you structure it correctly, generally the reaction that I will get is the senior C-level executives will sit there and be completely shocked. And not in a bad way. Like, I did not realize this is really what's happening in the trenches. We're sitting here joking about clients over golf and planning elaborate year-end parties and things like that. We're not really thinking about the customer. And we know this. Companies do not exist without customers. So your number one priority has to be the customer. So
Yes.
someone who has interaction with the customer will tell you how it is. So then we have a come to Jesus moment here. Was this all lip service? Are you really interested in trying to develop deeper relationships with your customers to provide better services and products to them? Are you trying to empower them? And if you are, we have a real problem here. Do you want to resolve it, or do you not want to resolve it? Almost always, I leave it up to the client to decide.
Yes, and this I think goes back into what we just talked about, is that there is, in generally speaking, just such a disconnect in extrapolating my experience onto someone else.
That's right.
And saying, if I experience that, then this is an experience everyone else needs to have. This is one of the reasons why I became a Myers-Briggs practitioner, because I needed to learn on how to understand how my personality type can help other personality types to achieve certain results. And then only to find out that, the way my personality type comes across needed a little bit of work. so that's just part of it. All right. So now we got that down. We crawled into the head. We mastered, putting ourselves in the shoes of them. And so now, how do you, in this strategy, how do you now create the solutions that they need to solve these problems?
Wonderful. So we now have clarity and buy-in and alignment with what the problem is. That's sometimes the hardest thing to do. Now we understand the problem. We talk about potentially if money and resources were not an issue, what would the solution look like? And we have a discussion about it. And then this is where we empower every single person in the room to spitball and come up with some really rough ideas. Okay, so we need a new video. We need a new website. We got to fix our email marketing campaign. Actually, we need a whole new service or product. Okay, we lay those out, and then we simply map them against the Eisenhower graph, the impact and effort. So what we want to do is we want to start with the thing that has the greatest impact while requiring the least effort, and we work our way up the difficulty chain. We get rid of things that are low impact and high effort, because that doesn't make any sense. And things that are high impact, high effort, we plan for, but we start with high impact, low effort. Because if the problem's solved right then and we get really lucky, we don't have to investigate option 2 or 3 or 4. But the point I want to make here is we're doing this live and we're facilitating this with the team. And so they're all getting to make the decision together. And the reason why we do this is because later on, we don't have to come back and sell them an idea. It was their idea that they voted on, and we have a discussion about it. Now, sometimes the clients make poor decisions. They say, well, that is really hard. It's a worthwhile pursuit, but that's really hard. And if you have enough broad-based knowledge, you can say, actually, I know how it might look hard, but I think we can have you partner up with vendors who can do this for a modest amount of money. all of a sudden something that was perceived very difficult for them becomes much easier, and then it gets prioritized differently. Conversely, if they think something's really easy, you might have to say the opposite, which is actually, in my experience, that's going to take 6 months and over $500,000 to do. We might want to weigh that a little differently.
Almost, it sounds like the process that you're using is very similar to like a classic strategic planning process on really throwing it in, weeding it out, and page by page by page, or step by step by step, leading them down that path to making those decisions. So I love that. So let's move on to our next question. I always wonder, and I'm already sure I kind of sort of know the answer to that. What matters to you personally? Is it because you're in business to make money, but you are here to impact 1 billion people? So how do you, maybe I'll ask you this question this way.
Okay.
So how do you value the making money and the making the impact? Is it the same? Is it different? How do you get that straight in your head? Because so many creatives actually struggle with the whole concept of getting compensated for their stuff that they love.
That's very true, Beate. So my answer is probably atypical. I think my focus is making impact. Making money is a byproduct of how much impact I make. And there are very smart people who talk about value-based pricing, and they'll say something to the effect that you're compensated based on how much value you create for the client. So the more value you create for your client, the more you'll be compensated. And versus saying, I want to be paid more, and then you don't understand what the goal is. So whenever I talk to clients, I try and find a big problem that's important to them to solve, that has some urgency behind it. It's not always a problem they come to me with. It is a problem that through conversation we find out together. Example, they come to me and say, you know what, we need a new logo. I'm like, great, love to make you a new logo. But what is the logo going to do for your business? What kind of impact will it have? And oftentimes they'll stammer through, it's like, we don't know. We just feel like we need it. Well, let's put that on pause for a second. Tell me about another problem that keeps you up at night right now. Like, what is just, what you grit your teeth and like, why haven't we been able to solve this problem? And then they're like, well, Chris, let me tell you, our customer turnover rate is way too high. It's well above industry standard, and we're spending so much money finding new customers while we're losing old customers. I'm like, well, wonderful. Okay, tell me more about that. So now we have a clue from the client as to what really matters to them, and it has nothing to do with the logo. And whether or not I can solve this problem or not is immaterial to me, because I don't want to take money to solve a problem that doesn't exist unless the clients insist. Sometimes they do. And then that way I can sleep easy at night. My conscience is clear. And I also know they have a real problem. Maybe I can connect them with someone who can solve that problem, even though it's not me.
And I'm going to share something with the audience that I learned from you that I use all the time, that I want them to hear from you.
Okay.
When I met you first, and you and I had a conversation about when you go into a meeting, how you prepare for a meeting. And I said to you, well, I do the research and I go do this and I go do that. Do you remember what you said to me on what you do when you go into a meeting, or what you don't do when you go into a meeting?
Okay. I think I understand the clue. So I think I might know the answer. And if I don't get this right, let's re-record that part. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So in my old days, I would prepare just like you. I would read the brief. I would do homework. I would do as much as I can. I would have a whole notebook full of questions. I'm ready to go. And when I talk to the client or the customer, I would try to track along, like, where am I supposed to be in my questions? And human beings are very complicated. They don't do exactly what we want them to do. So you might ask them a very bullet point question, like it's either this or that. And then they tell you a story and they give you a lot of other information. So instead of listening, my brain is starting to panic. I'm starting to think, oh, they've hit question 2, 4, and 7. And then I'm lost in the conversation and I'm not being present. So that's when they say, so Chris, you have any questions? My eyes will glaze over like, oh my God, I don't know yet. Hold on. Because I'm still trying to keep track of the conversation. So later on in life, what I realized is, you know what? It is better for me to know a little bit about the assignment, the brief, do a little bit of homework, and then just kind of forget about it. So when I talk to the clients, they lead the conversation and I just ask 1 or 2 questions, and that takes us through the entire conversation, because Every question opens up new doors. Those new doors have other doors behind them. And what happens is you don't go where you expect because you don't have any expectations, but you go where the client wants to take you. And this is a really powerful difference.
That's exactly what I was wanting to get to, because that changed so much for me, because it takes that burden off you, and it also changes the way you show up, and it reduces the assumption that clients come in with. You just need to have an answer. So when I say I'm going to do something that I learned from my friend Chris Doe, is that I do just enough so that I don't look like an absolute moron.
Right.
But I don't come in with having read every single thing, because that way I am fresh. And you said to me, I think these were your exact words. You said that you wanted to have the same experience that a customer would have the first time they had with that particular brand. And to me, that was such a game changing moment. And I've used that ever since. And I've told thousands of people about this. And no, because it releases the pressure of the feeling unprepared. And I think a lot of it is our educational system that is designed to catch people unprepared. And then we take that into our business, and it just erodes the creativity, because we expect other people to regurgitate information that already exists. And then we get just the same amount of information and the same stuff that already exists again and again and again. And then everybody wonders why there's no innovation and creativity. So I think I can take this like all the way. So this is fascinating. So now, where can we find you, and how can people learn about where you are, what you do? How can they get their fear of the future, their share of the future?
Before I answer that question, can I just add a little bit to what you just said?
Please
Because
go
I've learned
ahead.
a lot since our last conversation.
Go
years
ahead. Tell
ago,
me
right?
more.
Okay. So, as an instructor, I'm always trying to be a better teacher, and I work with Dr. Holtzman at Art Center, who's a faculty advisor. So he's trying to teach the teachers how to teach better. And so he says that a lot of times what we do is we're in this prescriptive mode. Someone shows us a problem, we jump on the answer. And I think, at least here in America, we're socialized to put value on people who have answers. So naturally, when we enter into the business world, we always think we have to have all the answers. And so we come super duper over prepared. And what we're not doing is we're not listening. And what we're not doing is we're not asking questions with the intention to learn. We're just asking fake questions so that we can get the opportunity to tell people what our answers are. And that's why a lot of times when you sit in a room and you talk to someone and then they say something and you think to yourself, were you even listening to anything I was saying? You're coming at this like, where'd that even come from? This total non sequitur that you're introducing. So what I've learned is what I want to do is I just want to be better at asking really good questions, because that gets everyone to start thinking about like, what is it that we really want? And why is it that we want this? And will this solve the problem? And in doing so, what happens is you give the client an opportunity to be seen, to be heard, and to think through the problem and get clarity. And that is very valuable. It doesn't seem like it on the surface, but if you just help them to understand the problem better and what the potential solutions are, you will be seen as a more valuable person in the eyes of your client. So I just wanted to add that.
Yes. And so there's two pieces to this. So number one, the first part you said is that I call this the jukebox. When they hear F2, they run the record, right? So when they hear the keyword, they don't even listen anymore. They just say what they have prepared because they prepared for it. So now this is the moment that they can unleash that piece of information. And number two, I believe that in this, if we lose the fear of not having all the solutions, and and as I go, and I've done a strategic plan for Amazon, and I'm doing now a strategic plan for a huge global $14 billion consumer brand. And as I'm going into this and I'm doing my prep, looking through the transcripts and pulling the things out so I can pre-populate the strategic plan, I'm realizing how much I don't know and how much I think they don't even know, because without the vision of what we are trying to do, there's a whole other element that's happening that we haven't even talked about. So I like that a lot, that there has to be a part where you detach yourself from the fear of being exposed, of not having the answer, but allowing the discovery that the answer can't exist because the problem hasn't been clearly defined. Am I rephrasing this correctly?
Yes, you are. And you just sparked another thing. And I hope I get this quote right. Something where I think it's a scientist who said a problem properly phrased as a question is like 90% of the solution or something like that. So when you understand what questions to ask, you're essentially solving a good portion of the problem. So my task, generally speaking, in a strategic conversation is, what problem are we trying to solve? Because I just want to know. And when you can ask the right question, the answer almost materializes before your eyes.
Yeah, my mindset trainer, David Nagel, always says, and if you would know the answer, what would it be? And so he tricks your brain into,
That's
I
right.
don't know, to, well, if you would guess it, what would it be? And then people say stuff and suddenly they do know. It's like, how is it even, how is that even possible?
Right.
Excellent. So anything else you want to add? Any other piece of wisdom you're willing to part with before we tell everybody how they can find you?
I think you and I could probably talk for hours. I do want to
Ours.
take one moment to thank you, because you shared an idea with me, and I'm gonna just do my movie reference here. In Inception, Leonardo DiCaprio asks, "What's the most dangerous thing in the world?" I'm like, "Yes, tell me what it is, Leo, because I don't know." And he says, "An idea." Because once an idea takes root in your mind, it grows and it changes who you are. And Beate, you shared an idea with me, which is, I want to do something where someone in the world will write me a thank you note, like an act of generosity that's reciprocated with a simple thank you. I didn't have the answer at that time, but I've been working at it. And I think now I found my way, and I credit you for this. I share this story often. If you've told that story a couple of times, I've told this story many, many times and amplified through my platform. So I think this is the gift of teachers and educators and people who are authors and experts, is that we cast a stone into the lake, it creates a ripple. And the ripple travels across the lake onto the other side, and someone else feels that vibration. And that's the beauty of teaching, is that these ripples go in infinite ways, because you have impacted me, and I hope I have impacted others, and they'll continue. And so that little stone that you throw, it can hit people generations from now, hundreds or thousands of years into the future. And I just love that part of it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. No, I think that it is very mutual. And I find that a lot of times when you get to the point where you're unafraid of sharing the real truth, right? What's really motivating you, what really is inside your heart, whether you're searching, finding, found it, willing to share, educate, whatever that might be. It's often years later that people come out of the woodworks and you don't even know them. And it was something that they heard on a podcast, an interview. They were sitting in the audience and they come and they tell you you changed their life and you don't even know them. But it was something so simple. So I think that's an important message to remind our listeners with that, the power that the word has as it's spoken and how people pick it up. You just don't know. And so language is important and how you show up is important. I always say that I take what I do very seriously because it does impact other people's lives. And so thank you for saying that. And it's very mutual. You quoted many times in my world. So how do we find you? How do we can get our fix of Chris?
Well, thank you very much. I try to make it very easy for people to find me. I'm at the Chris Do. Do is my last name, Do, and I'm on all social platforms: YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, anywhere that you think social conversations are happening. Most likely, I'm there.
Excellent. And also make sure you check out his YouTube channel with just an obscene amount of followers now and content that you can just swim in for days at a time. So thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I hope we get to do this again soon.
Thank you very much, Beate.
And that's it. You heard it here on the Business Growth Architect Show. This is your host, Beate Chelette. And thank you so much for watching and listening. If you like this, please share this with everyone you know and through all your social media channels. And that's it for us today. Thank you for listening and watching the Business Growth Architect Show. I enjoyed having you here. And for accountability, just take one of the strategies that you have heard, one thing that you can implement in your business immediately. Please leave comments. Don't forget to like and share this show. And if you have any questions about business, please put them in the comments. We are here for you. We're here to support you and help you to grow, build, and scale your own business. For more advice, please check out our website in the show notes below. Thank you again. This is Beate Chelette, the Growth Architect, and goodbye.